Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to be doing chapter 44. So let's get into it. Here we go. Ahem. Chapter 44, 1055. The city of Onslow had become great and impressive to walk through, and Hvitbjorn loved it. He'd been through here a dozen times throughout the last few years, either going out to raid the Dane lands or through which to return home or on his way through the country. Of course, he'd been here first when he was rescuing Skadhild some years past. He had to admit every time he saw this place and the other cities in Norway that Harold's rule meant wealth and prosperity. This place being where he'd founded King's Seat, and from which he intended to launch the excursions, made it grow swiftly. The streets were well made, long wooden beams laying across under the mud and gravel, all the houses constructed of good solid timber and thick yellow thatch dusted white in the snow. But what was most well made within the city was the industry. People ran every which way through the streets carrying cargo, working, cleaning, or seeking an alehouse to partake in of the imported or taken drinks. The place was also a hub of trade and commerce. Everything stolen from other lands or brought from foreign ports were here available for trade. Its placement and the incredible amount of goods being sold reminded Hvitbjorn of Miklagard. Of course it does, he thought. Harold was commander of the Varangian for many years and had learned much of power and economy. It seems he meant to make this port of Onslow the center of the north. Also, like Miklagard, the city stunk. Though the snow in the air made for a pleasant dampening of the stench, but though it stank as well, the smell was different. Somehow, Hvitbjorn found himself smiling at the memory of that smell. The stink of Miklagard was a pleasant memory. He moved to the side of the street and pulled his cloak tighter around himself as he realized something he'd never really thought about. He'd loved his time in Miklagard, and now he missed it. The shining and central city in the world, with all the diversity and heat, the dust and the unbearable brightness everywhere. He had been there for work, the best work to be done in the world, and only now did he see that it was so integral to his identity, by virtue of how much growth he'd done and wisdom he'd seen there. Miklagard would always comfortably fit in his mind as one of the places he could consider home. He shed a small tear at the fond memories, a tear that also was shed for his acknowledgment that he'd never go back there. He spent one moment both knowing that Miklagard had been an unspeakably special place and that he would not return to while on this realm. It was both things. Perhaps I will be able to see it from Valhalla. That statement, however, brought to him the memories of the vision quests, how he'd seen many places that mortals enter after their death, but never had he seen anything of the one he strove for. That memory mingled with others, the raging fire that kept his father warm, cowering in the larder while his mother was brutalized by 3 men, the death of so many of his friends by the hand of the king. These thoughts all filled him with such an uncontainable rage he thought he might scream out loud in the streets. He put his forehead against the building in front of him and breathed slow, deep breaths, then grunted and punched the wall from his leaning posture. The grain dug into his knuckles, but he knew that he'd made an imprint in the wood, and that made him feel better. He wanted to punch the whole damn house down, but straightened and turned to see if any were watching him. None were, but he felt an overwhelming heat within him. This unabating anger that he had for the world, for everyone in it, It was a strange and wild ferocity with which he loved his friends and hated anyone else. The day was not done, though the sun was gone below the horizon as they were close to the winter months. And still, in the late day's cold, with the snowfall and the water chill in the air, he felt like he was going to overheat standing there. He looked around the city in search of his goal this day. Rumors had told of a tavern by the water front where distant drinks were offered, some from the finest meaderies in the kingdom, boasting even a brew made by monks in Scotland that Ragnar had guessed was the barley malt. But its range of drink offered was not the part that interested Hvitbjorn. The place was reported to be called the Drakar's Head, and soon he found a place with a dragon figurehead looking out over the port. This must clearly be the place. He stood before the doorway and spent a moment thinking again over the rune that Skadhild had pulled for him today. Neat naughties, she'd said when she drew it from the bag. He looked and saw the symbol. The twin meaning and nature in it is strong. Very right for you, I think. The strongest flame and the coldest ice. The very things that met when the world was first forced to existence from the Guningagap. Just as with this force of creation, do not think of your differing natures as conflicting only, for it was from this opposition that all things were born. Use well your strange dualities to make something new, something strong. Think on the dual nature inherent to all things and grow in wisdom for this. He held the image of the rune within himself another moment, and then entered the tavern. Within he saw that it was not the expansive room that the long sail had been, nor the series of ornamented rooms like that of Canopus. It was a simple room with a counter and three long tables for people to sit, a well-made alehouse, but nothing overly impressive. There were some few people sitting at tables laughing and drinking. They were sailors, traders, Vikings, farmers. Many had come to join the life that grew with this city and worked to grow themselves. The heat still pressed up through his shoulders. He felt it under his arms and around his waist. He wanted to get naked and run into the sea, knowing he'd have to navigate through chunks of ice to get full in the water. But he breathed deep and removed his cloak to hang it on a wooden peg that protruded from the wall. His leather jerkin was still very warm, but without the cloak, he felt much lighter. He approached the barman then and saw that the man was staring at the cloak with recognition in his eyes. Hey, he said, trying to take the man's attention. Do you have fresh water? The man looked back to Hvitbjorn, and they locked eyes. The barman was old, well into his 60s, and had long silver gray hair. He wasn't ornately dressed, but he did bear a ring on his wrinkled, spotted hand that told of some wealth. What? Yes, I have water here. He noted then that the man resembled slightly a horse. This made him smile. I need some. Then meat. He brought up the horn he had tied to his belt. He'd had many horns in his life, still had many to choose from, but for this day he had the long, straight horn, no curve in it, just wide top to a sharp tip. The barman took a wooden pitcher from under the counter and poured the horn full of water. Hvitbjorn drank from it and felt the refreshing cold flood through him. He drained the whole horn in one draught and breathed loudly after he was done. Now meat. He held forward the horn and the man took it. As he passed it over for another pour, he noticed the man steal one more quick glance at his cloak. Hvitbjorn narrowed his eyes some at this. The mead he'd been poured was foaming strongly from the top. and he let it spill over the edge. The froth fell to the floor, and he grinned at it, feeling it run over his fingers. To the guts!
What my floors?
The owner said. Hvitbjorn looked at him, stunned.
I am bloating out for the guts.
He tilted the horn and poured some more deliberately from the lip.
We worship Christ here. Your filthy pagan rites have no place here.
The man's ire was surprising to Hvitbjorn. He blinked at the man.
Have wine?
He asked. The man paused, then nodded.
I'll drink some of your God's blood for me here tonight.
I think I'll need it.
Maybe while I'm engaged in the sacrament.
He didn't seem to understand Hvitbjorn's insinuation, and so he left the counter and sat at the table to drink. Once more he saw, as he put the horn down from the first drink, that the barman was staring at the cloak. Hvitbjorn looked ahead and pretended not to notice. This man knew something. He needed to find out what.
Harold,
he thought.
Harold knows of my cloak. He may remember me. He could have reasoned that the black-haired raider with the white cloak that he was forced to send from Sithiod became the ghost rider, the Varangian.
He smiled at the name, the memory.
And he may have some people asking questions through the kingdom looking for that man.
Someone in the tavern stood and left then with his friend. They left laughing at something that no one else heard. This left Hvitbjorn and the barman there with 4 others, but he wasn't worried. The mead was strong, obviously so from even the first drink, and he felt the warmth of it filling him. A different kind of warmth, a welcome warmth. The floating sensation that came over and around his head followed a moment later, and he reveled in it. As the evening wore on, he had his horn filled another time and spoke little with the others who sat about him. But he had made a point to speak with the old horse-looking man. He'd asked about the goings of the place and learned that Onslow was growing faster than even he'd expected. And within every question, he searched for clues as to the man's interest in his cloak, but he revealed nothing. He noted also a time when the barman took a drink to a table and exchanged hushed words with a bald man who wore an ample beard. Hvitbjorn glanced their way, trying to guess at their words, but if they were talking about him, but though they made no overt show of speaking of him, he guessed that they were. The man left the tavern shortly after their discussion. The other drinkers in the tavern came and went. Those he'd seen were here when he first entered were all of them now replaced with others. A tall and brawny orange-haired man with an equally hefty blonde woman came in demanding mead to drink. 4 men who'd been sitting at the next table over and discussing prices of fish stood together, and all left with thanks to the barman. None paid a moment's notice to Hvitbjorn or any others. That's a Freudian slip if I ever heard one. After some time, another man entered, and as soon as the door opened, the man at the counter looked hopefully to the threshold. His expression seemed to pinch some in frustration, disappointment, when he saw who it was. The newcomer walked right up to the counter and demanded a mead for himself, proffering a horn in his left hand to the barman. Though the barman attended the new patron, his attention was definitely directed elsewhere. He seemed to be watching the door, the cloak, and the man to whom the cloak belonged. Hvitbjorn watched him, doing his best not to make it obvious he was watching him.
Duality in nature. Duality in all things,
he told himself, remembering the rune. Then the bald and bearded man re-entered the tavern again, with a wiry man whose face was marred with a long scar. They both nodded to the barman, and his manner changed. The high frenetic energy that seemed to be sparkling about him calmed to a relaxed assuredness. Hvitbjorn nodded to these 2 as they came in, but they were doing their best not to look his way. He knew instantly that he'd been right about an aspect of the barman's intention and knew they were here for him. His desire to question the man quietly and alone seemed far less likely now, but nothing was impossible. As it stood, there were the tall, brawny man and the blonde woman, the other who'd ordered the mead immediately, Hvitbjorn and the barman, and the bald man with the scarred man. He wasn't sure if everyone felt as he did, but the tension in the room was building. Hvitbjorn mentally took account of all the weapons he had access to. He knew there was the long dagger at his right side. Then there was the Ulfbert and the axe with the man and the woman, and the sword at the other man's side. He had no idea if this was to be a fight, but he was always ready for it. The bald man and the scarred man took separate seats near him, but not too close. And he straightened his back without being obvious about it. A deliberate quiet seemed to descend over the bar, the whole tavern. Then the barman came and sat in the seat opposite him, on the table, with a mug of brown beer in hand.
Long day?
The barman asked.
Short day. It's too close to winter for long days. You know what I mean. Work today?
He asked, annoyed, but trying poorly to hide it.
Not yet,
Hvitbjorn replied coolly. He was aware that all those in the bar could hear them. The conversation had quieted down to nothing, though all were pretending not to listen.
Where are you from?
Far from here. Farther still to where I'm going.
Where are you going?
Far. Hvitbjorn had yet to look up into the old man's eyes. He instead focused down on the mead horn.
Fancy cloak, that one. Was it a yak or a white goat? You ever know a goat to get that big? You think I found Thor's goats and skinned one?
He also wore the smaller white cloak over his shoulders and rolled them each as he said it.
Where did you get that?
My father, same as my axe, who reforged the blades of 2 spears after we dug them out of the bear's heart. That was hard fight.
What axe? I don't see any axe about you.
Hvitbjorn clenched his teeth and looked at the man.
It was taken from me. I'll have it back one day. I am a hunter.
This made the old man furrow his brow some.
I've heard of a cloak like that.
Hvitbjorn drank, now making strong eye contact. It was him, the barman and his 2 friends, and the other 3 in the place.
Is that so? What have you heard? There was a man asking questions about the white bear's cloak. He wanted to know if I'd ever seen anyone with a cloak like yours. Said it would be best if I could remember right. Sounds like he didn't know what he wanted to find. Was there an announcement of the search? Who was it doing the searching? There was no announcement. It was kept quiet, but I'm no fool. I know the man was working for the king.
This raised Hvitbjorn's eyebrows now.
Why would you think the king wants a cloak like mine? I'm sure he could get one of his own, probably a better one. No, I think he wanted the man wearing the cloak. I'm also sure I could get a message to the king's men and get a reward for someone like that they were looking for.
At this, the bald man and the scarred man both turned toward him overtly. The old man sat back and looked around. It was clear he'd rather have done this with only his own men in the tavern, but he knew that would be less and less likely the more the night went on. Either his prey would leave, or too many more would enter.
You others here,
he said, addressing the room's other 3 occupants.
This man might have a price on his head. I think I am arresting him on the king's authority. Don't interfere and you will be allowed to drink here free tonight.
He turned back to the black-haired man in the white cloak.
And tomorrow night,
said the brawny orange-haired man with a laugh. The old barman was clearly annoyed to have to negotiate and huffed.
And and a meal. Something to sate my belly, the left-handed man said with a grin. Unless you want us to start asking after a portion of this reward.
This made the brawny man laugh again.
Hold on now, that.
The bald man with a beard said, standing,
The reward is none of your business. There's no guarantee for it. You want to transport and shelter the black hair while we are talking with the king?
All the while this was happening, Hvitbjorn had been staring at the old barman who'd been looking back. Hvitbjorn had a funny smirk on his face, which was clearly unnerving the men.
Now you all listen here. This one is mine,
the barman said. The barman began.
I have 2 men on you. You will come with us to the law keeper, or I'll cut off your fucking hand and drag you there. You understand?
The bald and scarred both crossed their arms in a threatening stance.
The man The man who was looking for the white-cloaked man seemed to think you were a danger. If the king's man thinks it's needed to regard you with danger, then you are most certainly worth something to the right people. But I'll deliver your head wrapped in your cloak if you give me any trouble.
Not a single word of the tirade made Hvitbjorn's expression quiver or smirk falter.
And these people won't help you. I know you came in alone, boy, so stand and come with us. I think I'll have another meat when I'm done. Who else will join me? You?
He asked the scarred man.
Perhaps you prefer beer, though. Never cared much for that myself, except the black stuff. I'll have more meat. Did you hear me? I did. I just wasn't listening. I don't care what you have to say. You talk shit when your mouth opens.
The utterly unflappability of this man had been perplexing to the barman to no end.
Who are you?
The man asked. He'd reasoned that this man must have seen an endless life of death and chaotic battle to sit so calmly given the threats he was facing.
I am the White Bear, and as far as I can see, I have 4 to your 3.
This made the man's furrow deepen.
You what? Skadhild?
At the word, the blonde woman stood drawing her axe at the same time and leapt onto the table. She pushed the end with a wild bark and plunged the axe deep into the bald man's bald head.
Oof, oof, oof.
She barked with a horrifying look of enjoyment in her eye. The scarred man already had his sword out and swung with advantage over the woman, aiming for her head. A sword blade appeared above her as Ragnar bowled into him, tackling him to the ground and grappling with both his arms. Hvitbjorn calmly drank from the mead horn as Niels reached the fight and stabbed the dagger he held in his left hand to the hilt into the scarred man's neck. He squirmed and struggled, but he was dead already. While all this was happening, the barman's shoulders jerked up to his ears, and he looked around in terror at the extremely fast violence that corrupted the world that was his to control. He went for a blade on his hip, but Skadhild was much faster and dove into the man, driving him to the floor.
Can I kill this one, White Cloak?
She asked, the wild fury in her eyes a mixture of passionate hatred and pure enjoyment. Hvitbjorn cleared his throat and had another drink. He stood and cracked his bones in doing so. Then he walked slowly around the table with the horn in hand until he stood over the pinned barman.
No. Do you remember Skad?
He asked, kneeling down. The man looked up with utter confusion on his face.
I don't know who you...
The man started to sputter as Hvitbjorn poured the mead over his face.
Skadhild!
She lifted him from the floor and slammed his shoulders and head back down onto the wood. Gah, fucking woman! What? She asked and slammed him again. Hey! Hvitbjorn said, kicking the man lightly in the head. Don't piss her off. I wouldn't want to, so you better really work not to. Do you remember Ilyaskat? Yes! Fuck, I remember him. We were fighting together in the old king's army for some years. And you are Dorvan Skilgir. The guards of the city are going to. Hvitbjorn threw aside the horn and pushed Skadhild off the man, then put his knee onto the man's chest and beat him in the face savagely. You remember when I asked you a fucking question? You will speak when I ask you a fucking question, or I'll cut your eyes out, do you hear me? Dorvan Skilgir, you remember what you did after the Battle of Stiklestad, do you? Do you remember a house with a woman in it? You remember? He yelled the last into the man's bewildered and horrified face. Oh God, I remember. The man sniffled. That was so long ago. It was 25 years. Sins come back to haunt you, Dorfand. That's your doctrine, isn't it, Ragnar? Aye, laddie, that's it. Then there you see it. Your sins are here in the form of the woman's son. Come back to haunt you. Where is the last of you? Where is Stephen Hostropner? I heard he was dead, the man said with tears in his eyes. Some sickness took him, I heard that too. You should know that Ilyaskad sold your name to me for cheap, very cheap. I hadn't even begun to ask him who you were. But he'd sold you. So, to me. So here I am. He took out his knife and held it over the man's face, causing the man to whimper more. Oh, come on. There's no need to be dragging this out, Ragnar said. Ragnar, your charity is showing. You don't know what this man did to me. Let's discuss this later, Niels said. There's still him to deal with. They returned their attention now to the man. Right, Hvitbjorn said. Where is Hostropner? The cheaper you sell, the less it hurts. He's dead. Some fever took him, I think. Where did you hear that? It were told me, but his words cut off as Hvitbjorn pushed the dagger into the man's shoulder. I don't know. Where did he live when he died? I don't know. But you know he had a fever. Your story seems thin, Dorvanda. He pulled the dagger out, slowly. Is torture the best way here? Ragnar asked, with deep discomfort. Ragnar, wait outside if you have to. Fucking gods. He won't talk. In one fluid motion, he drew his dagger and stabbed it into the side of the man's head, then twisted. He stood breathing heavily. Get everything you can out of here. We'll load all of it onto a ship and go. He turned the table and leaned against it heavily, still breathing hard. Are you all right, White Bear? Asked Niels. It's much. It is much. He grunted, his eyes closed. I feel the weight of destiny on me now. Well, let's get the drink. Leave him to his moment, said Skadhild. And look for the hoard, wherever he keeps his money, Niels suggested. Aye. But we shouldn't be stealing everything. We may want to... but we shouldn't be stealing everything. We may want to donate the money to some concern that's needed. We've done a great amount here already, and I didn't want to go too far. The others looked at him like he was talking nonsense. Ragnar, you... Just get the ship ready and let us deal with this, Hvitbjorn said, standing straight. The man looked about and saw the expressions of the others were unmoved. And so he huffed and left the tavern. We needed to watch, to make sure that no one else entered anyway, Niels said. Get what you can, Hvitbjorn said, and they went to the counter, but for Niels, who checked the pockets of the dead. Later, they loaded a barrel of mead and 2 casks of beer onto their ship at the dock along with a chest of the dead man's belongings that contained all they'd taken off the bodies. When that was done, they all stood together in the tavern and held each a horn or cup filled.
Don't ever question me in front of my enemies, Ragnar. Speak after you if you have to, but not while they are listening.
I were just speaking my conscience, laddie. I couldn't go on with what I were seeing. I canna let you go walking down that road.
On what road? What are you talking of?
This revenge you have so dear to ye. It's not healthy.
It honor demands it. What are you talking about? Of course it's healthy. Ignoring it would be more unhealthy.
The scriptures emphasize forgiveness. I'm but teaching you the things that are most important to my faith.
Ours is a different culture entirely, Ragnar. Forgiveness? And what? Let them walk Midgard with what they did and never pay recompense for it. You, no matter the crime or the suffering, no matter what I had to sit through, there, listening, and then had to live with the guilt and shame for having been left because I hid it. No, that I can't do. Never.
What I'm saying is, it would be better if you didn't. It would be better you didn't become worsened in your soul for this revenge you have so strongly attached to. Hvitbjorn scoffed.
These are the ways of thy gods, Ragnar. The Durin Valley killed their own brother in retribution for what was done. Aye, and where did that get them? To destiny!
He drank deep from the cup of mead.
We cannot fight fate, but this is no matter for now. Everyone out. Our work here is done.
He went to a brazier that was glowing in the corner and kicked it over. The coals scattered across the floor. He then pulled down a tapestry and laid it over the coals. The others all went about, taking anything flammable or already afire and spreading it around until many flames were growing rapidly and climbing the walls. The four walked slowly out the door. Hvitbjorn finished his mead and tossed the earthenware mug over his shoulders flippantly as they left the inferno. That is two of Hvitbjorn's promised vengeance taken care of. There is only Stephen and Harold himself left to him. And the vengeance takes deeper toll on the man, as always ever it must and will. I have many different themes and concepts running around in this book, and I think the idea of a true understanding of vengeance is a good one of them. It is obviously an extremely important part of all of the sagas, but there it is more an inevitability of the horrifying circle of revenge that it causes. No matter what, it just keeps on turning in a loop. I think ultimately they were saying that it is wrong and inevitable. And so until the end of time, humans will not really be able to forego their concept of revenge. So with that in mind, until next time.